In the third year of their marriage, Mary Johnson returned. For the first time, Robert Jackson didn't have dinner at home. He picked up his coat and went to the airport. He didn't come back that night. I followed Robert on Weibo and found Mary. I refreshed the page and saw that Mary's Weibo was updated. Finally returned to China. My lover and friends are by my side. In the accompanying picture, Robert and Mary are looking at the camera, surrounded by Robert's friends. I turned off my phone and closed my eyes, and closed my heart. 1. After get off work, I had dinner outside and took a walk along the river before driving home. There was light coming through the window. Robert had returned. I opened the door and stood in the entrance hall to change my shoes. Robert rarely came over, took my coat and bag and hung them on the hanger. "Why are you back so late today? I called you but you didn't answer. I asked your assistant and she said you had left work a long time ago." Pause. "Have you eaten yet?" I did. The person who does these things and says these words is usually me. Today it's his turn. I raised my hand to interrupt him. "I'm tired. I have to get up early tomorrow. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight." Passing by the living room, I saw a circle of dishes on the dining table, and even candles. What is this? I was with Mary last night and I felt guilty, so I came here to make up for it? How disgusting. I pushed open the door to the guest bedroom. Robert called me. "Susan Smith, what did you want to say last night?" I turned around and the warm light cast a shadow on his superior face, giving it a false tenderness. I have looked at this face for many years and never got tired of it. But the moment I saw him in that intimate photo with Mary, he was completely different. I forgot. I lowered my eyes and turned into the bedroom. Lying in bed, my hands unconsciously touched my abdomen. I was going to tell Robert about my pregnancy at dinner last night. But he answered a phone call, threw down his chopsticks, picked up his car keys and coat, and hurried out the door. He just left a sentence saying that something happened in the company. I sat at the dining table and waited quietly until the food is completely cool and loses its original color. A friend sent me a WeChat message saying that Mary was back. Somehow I found Robert's Weibo and opened his follow list. Following the clues, we found Mary. A minute ago, she just posted a Weibo. Finally returned to China. My lover and friends are by my side. In the picture, she is nestled in Robert's arms. Both of them are looking at the camera, and they are surrounded by Robert's friends. And Robert has never introduced any of these friends to me in the 3 years since we got married. Every time I tried to get into his circle of friends, he refused on the grounds that they were all bad friends. After a long time, I didn't think about it anymore. I flipped through the pages of time and found out that they had maintained a very close relationship for all these years. He arranged Mary's study in a school abroad. The apartment abroad is under his name. Even Mary's large expenses abroad were paid for by him. I never knew that Robert's gentleness and thoughtfulness could be transferred to others so easily. That night, I threw all the food on the table into the garbage bag and took it out to feed the wild cats. With a click, the guest bedroom door opened. I turned over and closed my eyes. One side of the bed suddenly sank, and Robert felt a chill on his back, and he crawled into the quilt. I stiffened my body and clenched my fists over my chest. After a while, a hand reached out and hugged my waist, and I felt a warm chest against my back. My heart shuddered and I felt nauseous. I sat up suddenly and turned on the bedside lamp. The lights came on brightly. Robert sat up with his eyes narrowed, his face looking very ugly. 2. Robert and I grew up together, living in the same villa area. Feelings come naturally. The year I graduated from high school, he confessed to me. We both knew in our hearts that it was just a formality, and we became a couple very smoothly. But in that year, my father brought home a girl who was 1 year younger than me. She was his illegitimate daughter. My mother had just passed away less than 6 months earlier. The gentle and elegant model husband and model father of the past turned into a masked devil in my eyes. I had a big quarrel with him and told him that if Mary was in this family, there would be no me, and if I was in this family, there would be no Mary. He just looked at me seriously with a cold face. "Whatever you want." I took the money my mother left me, packed a few clothes and left. I went to the school to get accommodation and never had any contact with this family since then. A year later, Mary was admitted to the university where I was studying with the help of a building donated by her father. She smiled on the surface, but secretly used tricks to alienate the relationship between me and my classmates and friends. He even relied on his father to attract investment and squeezed me out of the student union. Then he ran to me proudly and showed off. I never care about these things because the people and things that can be taken away are not worthy of me. There is always someone around me whom she can't take away no matter what she does. For example, Robert. Mary pestered Robert again and again, and even publicly expressed her love to him. Build good relationships with people around Robert and keep track of his movements. Then I would run into Robert by chance in classrooms, restaurants, stadiums, clubs, etc. Write your secret love diary on Weibo, and describe your secret love journey in detail. Robert's every move became a reason for girls to fall in love with him. She is like a fluttering moth. Even if there is a blazing flame ahead, she will risk her life for that little bit of light. Robert complained to me many times about Mary's crazy behavior. He also gave Mary the cold shoulder in public and told her to get lost. I wish I could be a million miles away from Mary, but Mary is like an invincible cockroach and a fly that cannot be driven away. It has been around us for 3 years in college. I even thought that Mary really loved Robert deeply, until Mary found me and said that Robert would fall in love with her sooner or later, and then betray me. I shrugged off her statement. Everyone can see how much Robert loves me. When they saw me looking for accommodation, they rented a house off campus for me to move in. He wanted to eat 3 meals a day with me. I like the osmanthus cake from the south of the city, but I can never buy it because it is limited. He, a young man who had been pampered since childhood, got up early to queue up. The osmanthus cake was still hot when it was handed to me. We both love traveling, but I am lazy by nature and not good at planning. He took care of everything, booking hotels, planning attractions, buying tickets, and packing luggage. I just have to follow him. We grew up together and have so many memories together. I simply don't believe he would betray me. After graduating from her senior year, Mary went abroad to study. I thought Robert and her story were over. But unexpectedly, through Mary's Weibo, I saw a different development trajectory of things. In the 3rd year of her pestering Robert's attitude towards her changed. 3. I reached out and drew open the curtains of the guest bedroom. It was dark outside without a single star. Robert sat on the bed in silence, not saying a word. After a long time, he finally lost his patience and his tone became a little irritable. What's wrong with you? Because of that little bit of guilt, he has endured until now. It's already remarkable. Since getting married, his company has grown bigger and bigger, and his temper has also gotten worse. He hasn't coaxed me like this in a long time. If it were in the past, I would have given in to him because he worked hard, but now I have softened my attitude. But now I don't want to put up with anyone. I turned around and leaned my back against the window. Who were you with last night? Didn't I tell you that I have something going on at the company? Who can I be with? When did you become so suspicious? I looked at him calmly without saying a word. I always thought that Robert was devoted to me and was a gentleman with principles. Never ask about his schedule and give him enough space. But every time he would take the initiative to confess. Then he pestered me to prepare his luggage. But in the end, he carried the luggage I had carefully prepared and boarded the plane to meet Mary. There was a flash of guilt on his face, but he quickly concealed it and became even more arrogant. Do you want me to check on you? Do you want me to call everyone in the company so you can check it out? No, go out now. I need to rest. He won't admit it. He has kept it from me for so many years. How could he fail so easily? I didn't want to get into a confrontation with him. His cheating and betrayal are certainly a thorn in my heart. After all, after so many years of relationship, I will always be sad. But reason tells me that it is better to know the truth now than to be kept in the dark forever. It is the best policy to make a decision when necessary. Robert couldn't stand my cold treatment, so he slammed the door and left with a dark face. After being disturbed by this, I lost my sleepiness. Turn on the computer to deal with the problems left over by the company. When I graduated from college, my father called and begged me to come home. He has brain cancer and is in the hospital, and he doesn't have much time left. When I arrived at the hospital, he was struggling to get up and pour water. The whole person is extremely thin. The housekeeper uncle said that there was a problem in the company. He devoted all day to work, worked for a long time and fainted in the office. When he was sent to the hospital for examination, it was already in the late stage. All the resentment seemed to disappear in the face of life and death. I began to recall the happy times of my childhood. He always picked me up and put me on his neck for a ride. When he gets home from get off work, he takes out all kinds of novel snacks from his suit pockets. When he was older and not busy at work, he would cook a pot of rich and delicious fish soup for me. He was sorry to my mother, but he really loved me. I took over a shaky company, working around the clock between the company and the hospital. There has been no news from Mary since she went abroad. 4. Early the next morning, I changed my clothes and walked out of the bedroom, not wanting to meet Robert. But the opposite happened. As soon as I left the bedroom, Robert was bringing the porridge to the dining table. He seemed to have completely forgotten yesterday's conflict and unpleasantness. He smiled and asked me to have breakfast quickly. As he spoke, he walked over and took out a watch from his pocket. He had it specially customized by a watchmaker. I have been given one every year for the past 3 years, just to cover the long scar running across my left wrist. That was before we got married, and I went with him to inspect a project. The destination is a remote mountain village. On the way back, the car's brakes failed and the car went straight down a steep slope. Fortunately, there was a big tree blocking the car, otherwise the car would probably have overturned and fallen into the ditch. The driver's seat hit a tree trunk and Robert fell into a coma. The door on my side was stuck, so I had to pick up my tablet, break the glass, and climb out of the window. Robert was slumped over the steering wheel, his face covered in blood. The situation was urgent, so I found their cell phones and tried to call an ambulance. The result was that they all turned into bricks. While I was dragging Robert out, I hit the car door with my left hand. The broken iron sheet pierced into the flesh, leaving this scar. Due to my own physical condition, this scar cannot be removed and will remain there forever. No one passed by on the path at noon. I could only carry him on my back and drag him, and I don't know how many times I fell before I reached the main road. People passing by helped call an ambulance. I also fainted on the ground due to exhaustion. After waking up, Robert was lying on the side of the bed with bloodshot eyes. After he was discharged from the hospital, he proposed to me. I was very confident about our relationship. It never occurred to me that his proposal might not be out of love, but out of guilt. I took off the watch on my hand and he subconsciously helped me put on a new one. Dodging his hand, I gently stroked the uneven flesh. "No, you don't need to wear it anymore." Robert's hand holding the watch paused. "Why?" "Dislike." Robert choked. "I don't like wearing a watch. It's like a shackle that always binds me. If Robert hadn't taken the trouble to customize it, I wouldn't wear it. Nowadays, there is no need to wear it." I handed him the old watch and went straight to the entrance to get dressed. "Susan." I looked back. Robert's eyes were a little complicated, and he seemed to be hesitant to speak. "How about you?" "I'll pick you up after get off work today." I rolled my eyes, opened the door and left. 5. Company. Assistant Thomas was a little abnormal today, and acted awkwardly around me for a while, until the elevator reaches the office floor. She stammered and spoke. "Susan, James is waiting for you in the office." James is the company's major shareholder, and someone my father trusts very much. Assistant Thomas isn't supposed to be like this. There must be something else. I nodded to indicate that I understood. "Open the office door." James was standing at the desk and Mary was sitting in my place on the office chair. Mary gave a sarcastic smile. "Sister, I'm back, please welcome me. You didn't even come back to see Dad when he was dying. Why are you here now?" Mary picked up the photo of me on the desk, looked at it carefully, then her grip loosened and the photo frame fell to the ground and broke into pieces. She walked towards me with a strange look on her face and bad intentions. "I really want to come back, but my dad told me that I can't come back unless Uncle James notifies me to come back." Uncle James smiled kindly, pointed to the sofa and asked me to sit down. It was as if I was the outsider. "Susan, your father gave me a will before he died, asking me to wait until the company is on the right track before announcing it. Now that the company is thriving, it's time. Your father only has 2 daughters, you and Mary. Considering that Mary has not been around since she was a child, your father decided to let her inherit the company. The old house and 5% of the company's shares will be inherited by you. The heater was on in the office, but I felt a chill running up my spine, and my body felt the pain and grievance before I did. I watched Uncle James' mouth open and close, but I couldn't hear a word. I mechanically took the will, and the handwriting on it was his. Mary took out a recorder from somewhere, with viciousness in her eyes, and pressed the play button. The company is not doing well. You should study hard abroad and don't come back. Your Uncle James will transfer money to your bank card. When your sister builds up the company, James will notify you to come back and inherit the company at the right time. If the company eventually goes bankrupt, you should not come back. As long as you don't come back, the debt will not be owed to you. The money I leave you is enough for you to spend in your lifetime. Dad is gone. You have to learn to take good care of yourself and find someone who truly loves you. Before my father died, he grabbed my hand and said that the company was the result of his and my mother's hard work. I must bring the company back to life. Promised him. For this promise, I went around soliciting business and investment, wishing I could do two things at once: be humble in various drinking parties and pretend to be nice among evil spirits. I drank so much that I ended up in the emergency room, and I still had to work even while on N4. I don't know how many days and nights I struggled through before I finally saved the company from the brink of death. But now someone comes to tell me that everything I insisted on was just a joke. It turns out that the saying, when a man is about to die, his words are good, is not always true. I ran to the bathroom and calmed down for a long time before my hands stopped shaking. When I returned to the office, I had completely calmed down. I will receive 5% of the shares converted into cash based on today's market value. And the salary, bonuses, and dividends I should have received over the years will also be deposited into my card immediately. Mary was a little incredulous when she saw that I didn't break down as she expected. Uncle James was stunned for a few seconds. Not today. This requires going through procedures. Get it done within an hour. You don't want anything that would damage the company's reputation to appear on the internet. I built the company on my own. I know exactly what its weaknesses are. If I want it, it would soon be the same as it was a few years ago. This company is the source of livelihood for the employees who have worked with me for so long. I won't touch it. But they didn't dare to gamble. Sure enough, a few minutes after I finished speaking, Uncle James called in an employee. An hour later, I saw the bank notification information flow. Pick up the bag and push the door open to go out. There was an annoying voice behind me. Susan, Robert will be mine too. I looked back at her showing off and felt that she was quite pitiful. She constantly proves her ability and presence in this way. In fact, I feel extremely inferior. I smiled and looked at her indifferently. Casual. Her rosy face slowly turned blue. 6. It wasn't until we reached the underground parking lot that my shoulders slowly dropped. The forced calm disappeared completely. I looked at my phone and smiled bitterly. Now I am so poor that only money is left. The fatigue of the past few years came upon me almost instantly. I walked weakly to the front of the car, opened the door, and found that there was already someone sitting inside. Look at the sympathy and heartache in Robert's eyes. I just felt like he was mocking me. The rusty head turned slowly. So this is what he meant before he left. It turned out that he had long known that the company I had tried my best to keep was just a gift to someone else. I closed the door and went around to sit on the passenger seat. Robert put a lunchbox in my arms and gave me careful instructions. You must not have eaten yet. Still hot. Eat something. We'll go home later, take a hot bath, and have a good sleep. We'll decide whether to rest or continue working after we wake up. I remember you always wanted to study for a master's degree. Why not take this opportunity? Robert. He stopped talking and turned slightly to look at me. My father asked you to take care of Mary before he died. So you knew his plan at that time, and then you watched me working hard for Smith as if it was a joke. Every Valentine's Day, Christmas, and our wedding anniversary, you would use work as an excuse to fly abroad to be with Mary. Last year, I was so busy at work that I fainted in the office. My assistant called you, but no one answered. At that time, you were watching the Northern Lights in Iceland with Mary. Just the night before yesterday, you left home in a hurry to pick up Mary, who had returned home. You were together that night. Also, you proposed to me because you felt guilty about me, right? I felt as if my soul was pulled out of my body, watching my body calmly narrating these things without a trace of emotion. Robert's face became paler and paler. He opened his mouth several times to explain something, but was interrupted by me waving my hand. He doesn't know when I learned so much. From his perspective, I knew nothing and was just sulking because of his sudden departure that night. He subconsciously knew that something was slipping out of his control and running wildly in the opposite direction. He became more and more flustered, but didn't know how to explain. I'm not saying this to expect any response. I just feel that it shouldn't be just one person suffering like this. My dad and Robert are people I hold close to my heart and are the people closest to me. But they were the ones who stabbed me in the back. Tears fell on the lunchbox. Why are you doing this to me? What gives you the right? Robert panicked. He and Susan grew up together, and except for the time her mother died, he had never seen her cry. His heart ached badly. Susan was his treasure, but he didn't know when he became the one who hurt her. Robert took out some paper and helped me wipe my tears. Susan, stop crying. It's all my fault. Don't cry, I feel bad. I didn't hear what Robert said next. My stomach ached badly and cold sweat broke out on my head. I hunched over, my fingernails digging into the lid of the lunchbox. Then I felt heat under my butt. Robert saw that something was wrong with me and quickly leaned over to check on me. He wiped his fingers on the seat and his hands were covered in blood. He was so panicked that he started the car quickly. Susan, let's go to the hospital, just hold on a little longer. 7. Robert carried me to the hospital and the nurse took me there on a cart. Robert walked with the cart and held my hand. Susan, hold on, hold on. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. He kept emphasizing it, and I didn't know if he was comforting me or himself. The operating room door closed. Through the crack in the door, I saw him slowly sliding down along the wall. The anesthesiologist pushed the drug completely into my body. I gradually became aware. It was night when I woke up, and the strong smell of disinfectant made me frown. The light was a bit dazzling, and it took me a while to get used to it before I could fully open my eyes. Robert stood at the door, cell phone to his ear, talking to someone unknown. Suddenly, he looked at me and our eyes met. He hung up the phone and strode to the bedside, somewhat anxiously. Following my gaze, he looked at the cup on the bedside table and quickly reacted by pouring hot water into it. He raised the bed, helped me sit up and put the cup to my lips. I took a few sips of water from his hand, and my throat felt much less dry. The child is gone, isn't he? I stroked my belly and looked at him helplessly. After learning that Robert had cheated on me, I hadn't figured out what to do with the child. As the blood flowed away, I could clearly feel that the child was getting farther and farther away from me. An inexplicable pain swept through my heart. What follows is anger, helplessness and heartache. He reached out and pushed Robert away, and the water in the cup splashed on him. My voice sounded a little distorted in the empty ward. It's all your fault. You killed him. I grabbed Robert's collar and looked at him fiercely. Robert, you killed your child with your own hands. You killed him yourself. Tears kept coming out, my chest kept heaving and I could hardly breathe. Robert's eyes were bloodshot and he grabbed my arm. I'm sorry, it's my fault. There will be children. I picked up the cup and smashed it on his forehead. He ignored the blood on his forehead and held me tightly in his arms. Susan, calm down. He rang the call bell. The nurse came in with a tray and gave me a sedative. Pregnant women are already in poor health, and the severe mental stress that causes miscarriage must take good care of themselves during this period, and should not have major emotional ups and downs. You are her husband, right? Go to Dr. Lin and take note of the precautions. Robert tucked the quilt in, walked out and closed the door gently. More than 10 minutes later, he walked back into the ward with white gauze on his forehead and a bag of medicine and a thermal lunchbox in his hands. He sat down quietly. Robert, let's get a divorce. 8. Robert didn't agree. He never showed up again after that day. Aunt Linda, who has taken care of me since I was a child, came to the hospital to complete the discharge procedures. She kept me at home and took good care of me for a month. I'm so idle that grass is growing on my head. Mary does harass me from time to time. Either it was a photo of her and Robert, or her redecorated office. Sometimes she would come directly to the old house, stand in front of the bed and laugh at me for being a shitty rich girl. She had taken everything away from him. Aunt Linda ran out holding a frying pan and chased her away, cursing. The security system was then upgraded and a few more security guards were hired. The old house was surrounded like an iron barrel, preventing Mary from getting close at all. With the daily feeding of delicious food, he gained 10 kilograms in weight. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, looking at my belly, and fell into silence. He turned around and ran into the gym in the old house. Then he was scolded by Aunt Linda, who heard the noise. I could only rub my nose and watch her lock the room with the key. While glaring at me, she wrapped the key in 3 layers of cloth and put it in her pocket. In such a peaceful and leisurely month, I slowly forgot about the sad things. Under Aunt Linda's inspection, I met all the requirements and successfully gained the right to enter and exit freely. The first thing is to have a lawyer draft a divorce agreement. The second thing was to go to the previous house and pack my luggage. I opened the door and a pungent smell of alcohol hit me. I frowned in disgust and spotted Robert sitting among the bottles. He must have taken out all his wine collection. When he saw me come in, his eyes were hazy and he slowly got up from the ground. He walked up to me, lowered his head and reached out to touch my face. We were too close and the hot breath was mixed with the smell of alcohol, so I snapped his hand open. He muttered with a wry smile, "This is just another dream. I didn't dare to see you, but luckily you were willing to come to my dream. Susan, I'm sorry I missed you so much." As he said that, he walked up to me and wanted to hug me. I picked up the cold water on the coffee table and splashed it directly on his face. Cool water dripped down his hair. His confused eyes gradually became clear. I took the divorce papers out of my bag and placed them on the table. He seemed to be stimulated by the words on the homepage, and his pupils suddenly shrank. I went straight into the bedroom, took out my suitcase and put some important things in it. He followed me, his tone stubborn. "I won't get a divorce." After a pause, he continued, "Mary and I are not what you think. I didn't cheat on you." She kept pestering me. I found it annoying at first, but then I felt sorry for her and gradually we got in touch. After graduation, you stayed at the company all day, and we barely saw each other for a month. I was very lonely, and Mary was just a distraction. I just went out with her and never did anything inappropriate. I know the contents of your father's will. I have no intention of helping them. I just think that if there is no company, we can have more time to spend together. I know I have done a lot of wrong things, but I really love you. Susan, you said you would never leave me. My hand on the zipper paused slightly. Robert's parents left early and he grew up with his grandfather. Robert's grandfather came from the army. After he recovered, he went into business, made some achievements, and was very strict with the younger generations. After Robert's parents left, Robert's grandfather returned to the company and took charge of all the affairs of the company. There was only harshness towards Robert. Once he had an argument with Grandpa Robert and ran away from home. It was I who found him in the corner of the playground. It had just rained heavily and he was soaking wet as he huddled next to a treehouse. When he saw me, his black eyes looked at me without blinking like a puppy. He said that after his parents died, there was no one to accompany him anymore. My grandfather only knows how to work, and he will be punished if he makes the slightest mistake. After finishing his rant, he looked at me seriously. The driver said that everyone will die, and my grandfather will die one day too. Then I will be left with no relatives. Seeing Robert so vulnerable, the young me was filled with a desire to protect him. I promise it solemnly. Robert, I will never leave you. I did exactly that. But he is not worthy of my promise now. 9. In a few seconds he straightened the suitcase and pulled out the handle. Robert, that was my promise to your old self. You are not worthy now. I was about to leave with my luggage, and he reached out and grabbed the corner of my clothes. It was like going back to the day when he ran away from home as a child. Susan, we've been together for so many years. This shouldn't be the outcome. Can you please give me another chance? Haven't you always wanted to see snow in the north? Now that winter is almost here, how about we go to Qingdao? I took a step to the side and the corner of my clothes slipped from his palm. He stared blankly and suddenly punched the wall beside him, with anger filling his heart for a moment. At the same moment, the door opened and Mary walked in. She saw Robert's bloody hands, and tears of heartache flashed in her surprised eyes. She ran forward and grabbed Robert's injured hand. But Robert pushed him away. She pursed her lips and tears kept flowing like beads from a broken string. Robert, I just feel bad for you being hurt. She stood aside at a loss, as if she was heartbroken by Robert's move. But Robert's eyes were alert. How do you know my password? Last time you were drunk and I sent you back, you were the one who told me the password. So that's how those photos were taken. I nodded thoughtfully. Mary locked eyes with me, saw what I was thinking and stabbed me with a look. I curled my lips indifferently. Robert closed his eyes, walked forward and pressed the suitcase. Susan, I was drunk and didn't volunteer the password to her. My eyes turned and showed a little doubt at the right time. Really? But Mary said you are hers, so I lose. So you two are already living together. I told you I loved you from the beginning to the end. It's just that you were too busy before, and she kept pestering me, and she looked a bit like you, so I was distracted. Robert grabbed my hand and looked at me sincerely, not even glancing at Mary. Susan, you can do whatever you want, but don't leave me, okay? Mary stood there in disbelief. Maybe she was pestering Robert with the intention of getting revenge on me at first. But after such a long time, she has become a part of the game by taking the initiative to join. She loves Robert, and her eyes light up when she looks at him. Then once she finds out that Robert ignores her, her heart will be broken. Robert, you flew overseas so many times to spend holidays with me, took me on trips and even paid for my schooling. When I returned to China, you picked me up and took me to a party hosted by your brother, and kept me company for a night. How can it be just because I look like her? She grabbed Robert's arm and looked at him pleadingly. You like me, don't you? Robert looked at her coldly and pulled her hand away. I went to pick you up just to make it clear to the brothers that your incident is over. I don't want Susan to know you exist. I made it clear to you from the beginning. I need your face and time. In exchange, I will give you money and resources. Mary's eyes were vague and she looked distraught. Ha ha ha, exchange. Yes, I know it's an exchange. It's an exchange. After spending such a long time together, she has been completely immersed in the atmosphere. Forgot the conditions under which the two of them started. Or maybe they thought that condition was no longer valid. But Robert was always sober. No wonder he never touched her. She thought it was because he loved her and didn't want to treat her casually. Those fantasies about love are all delusions of one's own. She had worked so hard for so long, using all her heart and energy, but she still couldn't beat Susan. But why do they all love Susan? She looked at Robert and found that Robert's eyes were fixed on Susan, full of caution. He has never been so humble. He was always at ease around her. She thought he showed his true self around her because he treated her as his own. But I never thought that he was so unscrupulous just because he didn't care about me. It turned out that he had never liked himself at all. She lost. 10. Mary didn't close the door when she left, and the draft whistled through the room, giving people a chill. Looking around this place where I have lived for 7 or 8 years, the happy and joyful past passed by like a tide. I looked at this man whom I had loved for a long time and said calmly, let's part ways amicably, don't make it too ugly. He smiled bitterly. But I don't want to part ways. I went to Kyoto alone. The forbidden city in the heavy snow with its red and white colors contrasting with each other, looks like an ink painting full of charm. The alley in the heavy snow feels like returning to my childhood. At that time, my mother and I spent the new year at my grandfather's house. On New Year's Eve, when it was snowing heavily, my grandfather carried a shovel and built a weird snowman for me outside the door. At that time, I was crying and grabbing my grandfather's sleeve because the snowman was so ugly. Now when I want to build a snowman like that again, I can't find the little old man who threw snowballs at me. After spending a month in Kyoto, I flew to Qingdao. Bought a house by the sea. Fall asleep to the sound of the ocean waves at night. When I opened the window early in the morning and went to the balcony, I saw the vast ocean. When it snows, the entire beach is covered with white snow. From a distance, only white and blue are left between the sky and the earth. Walking on the beach in boots, the soles of my feet squeak and the waves roll in the snow. The wind stung my face, but I felt clear-minded and the world was so big. I passed by a flower shop on my way home and bought a bunch of tulips. In this white world, a touch of yellow adds a lot of vitality. Holding the bouquet of flowers, she walked briskly on the way home. I saw Robert outside the door, whom I hadn't seen for a long time. He leaned against the railing, holding a bunch of bright red roses in his hand, with the endless sea behind him. He had lost a lot of weight, and his eyes were bright, and he looked at me almost greedily. "Susan, you look much better. After you left, I thought about it for a long time. I couldn't stand the days without you. I wanted to pursue you again. We have been together for so many years that he thought I would not be willing to give up our relationship of so many years. He thought that as long as he worked hard and was sincere enough, he could mend the rifts, reconcile, and go back to the time when nothing had happened. But he didn't know that no matter how the cracks were repaired, there would still be traces left. Even if we try to reconcile, what happened will be like landmines buried around us, waiting to explode at any time." Snowflakes slowly floated down and landed on the roses, making the petals look even more delicate and beautiful. "But unfortunately, I only like tulips now. I didn't let him in." His eyelashes trembled slightly, and the confidence he had built up with great difficulty collapsed. He should have realized before he came that I wouldn't agree. But he ignored my refusal and used his money and ability to buy the house next door. Blind efforts that lead to no results. I don't have any feelings about it, because my application for postgraduate study at the University of Hong Kong was accepted. In a few days I will fly directly to Hong Kong. 11. The day before departure, Robert knocked on my door. "Susan, do I really have no chance at all?" His eyes were lonely, and tears suddenly fell as he spoke. "It's all my fault. If I hadn't done those things, we would be fine now and I wouldn't have lost you. I lost you myself." I interrupted him coldly. "Just sign the divorce agreement. As for right and wrong, you can decide for yourself." "I don't want to hear it." I slammed him outside the door. When I went out the next day, I saw a document bag at the door. And next door it's empty. After my graduate studies, I returned to Haishur and moved into my old house. While meeting with old friends, I heard about Mary's current situation. She seemed to be going crazy after she knew that Robert had never loved her. She wouldn't accept a trace of me. Smith tried every possible means to dismiss the capable general I had trained. She flatly rejected the development blueprint I planned for the company. Smith's is worse now than when I took over. If she had been a lazy CEO and let the company run normally, it would have been profitable for at least 10 years. A good hand of cards was played badly. However, these have nothing to do with me anymore. I was recommended by the University of Hong Kong to study for a doctorate at a university in Kyoto. After spending some time with Aunt Linda at the old house, it was time for me to set off again.